It's Sunday in South Carolina. Welcome to the Touchdowns podcast presented by Harrison Williamson Cross Country Mortgage. Thomas and I got a very special guest today. We have Wes Mitchell from Gamecock Central hopping on the horn to talk a little transfer portal and tidbits on the team and the offseason. First of all, Wes, thanks for coming on and joining us. Would love to have you quickly just introduce yourself and your background to the audience.
Yeah, appreciate you guys for having me on. Actually, I've known Thomas and Ross, who's behind the scene right now, for, I don't know, man, like a decade, I feel like. So we kind of go far back in the recruiting game, but I have covered South Carolina recruiting and football actually for, I think, about 15 years now, believe it or not. Not all that with Gamecock Central, but a heavy portion of that with Gamecock Central. Also, the last, I guess, maybe 3 years or so, we've partnered up with 107.5 The Game as well and have kind of a Gamecock Central 107.5 kind of collaborative effort there at 11 o'clock to noon. But, yeah, just have always kind of followed South Carolina recruiting even before that and try to bring the word of what's going on to the Gamecock fans out there.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, Thomas and I, we grew up on Rivals and Gamecock Central, and that's where we used to go for our.
We had to log into Rivals, not 247, so we were always partial to Rivals because we got the intel. Didn't have it. No one's dad had the login for 247.
So talk about, just right off the bat, let's get to the meat and potatoes, Wes. 4-8 in the 2025 season, and Thomas and I have talked about how Beamer needed to nail the offseason and really recapture the fans. Almost, there were a lot of fans, especially guys that we're friends with, that were straight up out on the guy and maybe wanted him gone. Talk about, maybe give him a grade for his offseason so far, between high school recruiting, transfer portal, new coaching staff. There's a lot of things that have happened since we last played football, in November. So just run through that for us, please.
Yeah, I mean, guys, I don't know. After a 4-win season, and a disappointing 4 wins at that, in the fact that there were pretty high expectations going into this year. I think a lot of people were kind of like your friends, like, hey, I don't know if I'm feeling this anymore. But I would say I don't know if it was possible for him to have a better offseason than he's had to this point. I would start with the hire of Kendall Briles. To me, the first OC that South Carolina has had. Maybe you count Bobo for a year, but the first OC that they've had since Spurrier, save maybe that 1 year under Bobo, that just has a true resume of, hey, I have an offensive scheme, I have an approach, and you can just hand me the offense and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And, I think there's something to be said for an OC now that has a resume, even, on the recruiting side, just kind of knowing, hey, here's our offensive philosophy. So if you're evaluating a wide receiver or quarterback or whatever position, you're recruiting towards that philosophy as opposed to let me just get the best player possible. So I think that's an advantage there that South Carolina has not had. I like the other assistant coaching hires as well. Obviously, I mean, Shane has had to fire 2 running back coaches at this point. So getting a veteran like Stan Drayton, clearly that's a room where, he's not been happy with the production, or you wouldn't be firing 2 guys at that same spot. So I think getting Drayton, getting an offensive line coach that is tied at the hip with Kendall Briles, that's another thing. They've kind of been plug and play, I feel like, at that position, not necessarily where, hey, let's go get an offensive line coach that is tied specifically to this offensive coordinator. Recruiting class, I think it ended up being 15, 16 guys, top 15 class. I mean, I think that's about as good as you can do coming off the season they had. Holding on to Duckworth was obviously pretty big. You keep a quarterback in there. Adding Julian Walker at the end, especially now that we see that edge room has kind of cleared out a little bit, that may end up being pretty big. And, I think the portal class is a needs class. Really, I'm sure we'll talk about some of those guys, but we knew going in, hey, it's going to be the trenches. Can you load up on the O-line? Can you load up on the D-line? We'll see what they finish this thing out with. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think even if you're a Beamer hater, like, you probably have to give this offseason to this point a pretty solid, like, passing A grade, I would think, just based on what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he had to do this to, like I said, recapture the fan base and really, Thomas and I call it drinking the Kool-Aid, and we've tried to stay away from that because that's what we've done our whole lives is be disappointed in the fall and then convince ourselves the entire spring that the following fall is going to be different. So we're trying to maintain, reasonable expectations, but it's hard. It's hard when you are nailing the off season like Beamer has, and he feel like he's checked all those boxes that we wanted to see ever since the season ended.
Don't y'all feel like the Gamecocks are at their best when nobody's drinking the Kool-Aid? Like it always, we always, I feel like, set our expectations based on what happened the last season, and then there's like building momentum, and then you get let down. I mean, we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but I could see 26 being kind of like the 24 season where, nobody's got expectations because the year before, and then the team gets rolling, get some momentum. Lenoris plays better. And, as bad as this year was, I think this season, if 16 is playing the way we all thought he was going to play, and I think there's 1,000 reasons why he didn't. A lot of it probably is on Shula and some other things. But if everything else is the same and 16, I think, is playing to what we thought, it's certainly not a 4-win season. So I will add this. I know Beamer kind of ticked people off by saying, "Hey, we're close. And when you're winning 4 games, nobody wants to hear that. Like, I get it. Nobody wants to hear we're close. It's not a good press, soundbite by any means. But I think what he probably meant by that is like, all right, the difference in 4 and 8 in this league, and then 8 and 4 is like 1 or 2 things are going your way or not. So I think the big thing for them is, have they done enough this offseason that you flip those key 10 plays in any game to where you're now kind of winning those games as opposed to losing them, which to me is, even you go back to the 9-win season in 24, it's like, all right, if you flip those plays they made to the other way, that's probably not a successful season either, So right. You're always like, you're kind of always in the balance, I feel like, in terms of being really good or people being like, you suck, basically.
Right. I want to ask you this, Wes. As you said, you've been doing it for 15 years. Probably outside of college coaches and support staff and the college players, no one's life or career has changed more because of the portal than yours. Have y'all taken a different approach to how you cover high school recruiting? Because back in the day, that was the end all be all. Y'all's kind of culmination of the year was National Signing Day. Do you allocate less resources to covering high school camps, just knowing that it's a more prevalent piece of roster building to, like, these programs are going to be, for more or less, constructing next year's roster via the portal, so we don't have to spend as much time on high school or covering it?
Yeah, I think it's a good thought, man. Our kind of end of year, which used to be like, all right, signing day was Christmas for a lot of fans,
right?
And we had to treat it that way. And it was like, hey, man, the lead up to signing day, like those 2 or 3 days, you're just like, you almost like, if you got a wife or girlfriend, you're telling them like, hey, I'm out of commission, and then that day you're like, all right, I'm up. I better be up at 6 a.m. and I better be ready to just go, basically. And so the big thing is just signing day has like kind of just lost its edge completely. Fans still follow it. We're constantly like tracking our numbers. What are people consuming? You know, right down to not just do you click it, how long do you stay on it? And high school recruiting, I still think there's a place for it. I still think you cannot build an entire you can't build a program. You might be able to build a team in the transfer portal. You can't build a program in the transfer portal. And so I think it still matters. But people definitely, because there's, it used to be you might follow a guy. I mean, y'all said y'all would log on. You might follow a guy and be like, man, I read about that kid as a sophomore. And then I followed his whole recruiting process. And then I followed him through an entire 3 or 4 year career at South Carolina. You're like, I know a lot about this human being. You know what I'm saying? And now I feel like people, they can't get too attached because, a staff may recruit a kid for 3 years. He comes in, he doesn't play year one, and he hits the portal. So it's just almost like a defense mechanism, I think. I'm not going to get too attached to that one player. And so, yeah, we have to treat it differently. We go out to the camps all summer. We still devote our time and resources to that just because it's great networking for us and a great opportunity just to be around the program. And it has long-term value that I think goes beyond, well, like, who's reading this article about, a junior in high school that may not ever play for Carolina. Maybe not as many people. The other part, because the high school stuff has gotten so early, I mean, Thomas, used to be able to go out there, as you know, there'd be like a 5-star rising senior who's just at your camp competing. And you're like, oh, let me go get my eyes on this guy. Now those guys already have their offers. They're taking official visits. They're making their decisions, right? So they're not even competing in the camps.
I'll say this, in my short stint working in the recruiting office under Muschamp, to that point that you just mentioned, like, there were very few high-profile guys that would actually mix it up at camp. I think one of the few guys that I saw that came into camp with a high 4 or 5-star rating that actually did everything that we asked him to do and actually competed, interestingly enough, was Will Shipley. I was pretty disappointed that he ended up going to Clemson because, once I found out that we weren't really in the mix, I was hoping that he would just go to NC State. But I liked who he was as a kid because a lot of the other guys that were similarly rated to him had their offers. They just hung out. Like they might do like a private one-on-one workout for their position coach while they were there, but they weren't in the camp with all the other kids that were just there because they're fans or they were fighting for an offer. But Shipley did everything when he was there.
And I'll even, to me, that's an evaluation piece too. Like,
it is.
Do you want to compete even if there's no reason whatsoever for you to have to compete? The camp, a lot of times you can see some juniors at camp where you can look back and be like, okay, that guy ended up being a 4 or 5-star guy. But most of the dudes that you might have some seniors that, Nicky Memori, he worked out as a senior, but it was because he was working out to land that offer. Basically, It was a very different, situation. But we actually, from a coverage standpoint, we now treat the transfer portal pretty much the way, like, whenever, I know the window has moved around pretty much every year, I guess. That transfer portal window, we kind of have to treat it the way we used to treat National Signing Day. Like, because fans hate the portal, but they also love following the portal. Like, they hate the idea of it, but it's kind of like free agency for professional sports. Like, You're like, hey, who's my team going to get? Who are we going to sign? Who are we going to land? And so our numbers show that people actually like eat it up
Well,
essentially.
you get the instant gratification. You know that it's only open 2 weeks, so for better or for worse, we're gonna get you're finding out something in the next 2 weeks because they can't enter after that. Although I think everyone that's currently in, even though it's closed now, can still sign somewhere else. So we could see future commitments and we can still add to our roster before next season. But I think that people like the portal because you don't have to wait. It's not a slow burn like high school recruiting.
Yeah, it's like let's take 2 years and cram it into 2 weeks, basically.
Yes.
And for some of these guys, it's crammed into 2 days. It's like this guy entered the portal, he's looking at 2 schools, he pretty much already knows where he's going, and then boom, he's committed. I think it was important for them to go out and win to get Jacarius Peak and win like one of those high profile, like you're beating out Alabama, Texas A&M, and you're proving you're willing to spend some money essentially to fill a need. Like to me, that was one of the most important, I would say, storylines of the offseason too, is South Carolina basically being willing to go out and do what needed to be done to get a guy like Peak. Because I think even in your portal class, you need a guy or two that fans kind of attached to and are like, hey, that's a guy who's going to come in and not just play, but be a big impact guy, I think.
To that point, do you see, as far as when you look at, we have 22 incoming transfers, who do you see as the biggest impact guy that we were able to pull out of the portal? Is it Peak?
Yeah, I think it's got to be Peak. On paper, to me, he's just a notch above, everybody else in that class, and just a fit in the sense of, look, you need that. You had to rebuild the entire O line, but that left tackle spot is the hardest one to fill on the offensive line. That's where, just even from a value standpoint, you're going to have to spend the most money. And to go out and get, I guess Seton is probably ahead of him now, but when he committed, he was literally the number one offensive tackle in the transfer portal. And so to go do that, get that done. And the other thing, it was interesting, there were some earlier offensive linemen, even including one who is from the state of South Carolina, that were in the portal, that were kind of connected to South Carolina. And we were told, hey, Peak is sort of the one they want just because he is a fit for what Briles is looking for. And so what we were told is basically they don't necessarily want these 6'8", 340-pound offensive tackles in this scheme. You may see some like kind of big maulers at the guard position in this scheme, but at tackle, they're willing to take like the 6'4" guy if he is super athletic and can move. And I know typically your tackles are going to be more athletic anyway, but they really are going to lean into that aspect of it from an evaluation standpoint within this scheme. So, I think Peak is the guy. I think Caleb Herring, tacking him on here sort of at the end, they think there's some upside there to go from what he was at Tennessee. And, he's got to go earn it. But I think the thought process there is, hey, we're recruiting this guy to come in and start opposite Dylan. And, he's got to go beat out the other guys, but that's the thought process. The kid, Durajaye, that to
From
me
Illinois.
is, yeah.
Yep.
That's a nice pickup just in terms of like, I don't know if he's going to come out and be a first team all SEC guy, but he's just played, like the last couple of seasons, he's played everywhere he's been. I think you can plug him in and just say, hey, he may be a starter at defensive tackle, or he may be that third or fourth rotational guy, but they like to rotate those guys in and out and keep them fresh. So anybody you can get in the trenches that has just had some production at the Power 4 level, I think is something that they were kind of looking to do this cycle.
Yeah, do you think Josiah will bump to right tackle now that Peak's in the room?
Yeah, that's my guess, Beck. Like that's something I'm hoping to track down and be able to say from like a sourcing standpoint, like, hey, this is the plan. So this is just my opinion. I would think so, and I think getting Josiah back may quietly be one of the bigger storylines of this portal window as well. I know he didn't play kind of to the standard any of us thought he was going to this past season, but I do still I think there's some talent there. Obviously, I think he was. I think he also was banged up a little bit. I think a new scheme, a new coach. I think all those things will probably be good for Josiah going into next year. And that right tackle spot was probably going to be, if you're looking even at who they've brought in and who they bring back, that was probably going to be a pretty big question mark. Now you're going, all right, this kid was recruited by everybody out of high school. Can you kind of reset? Can you let him reset? And, let's find a way to get this guy, get his confidence back up and get him playing the way, you really thought he could when you recruited him. Because for a freshman 2 seasons ago, he at least like held his own playing left tackle in the SEC. So I think that could end up being pretty huge for them, because I think in a perfect world, if you're saying, hey, what gets the best five in terms of baseline talent on the field, to me, yeah, you're trying to get Peak and Josiah both into the lineup in some way.
Yeah. When I look at the class, I kind of see more or less what I expected us to try and do. The only position groups that maybe have surprised me a bit would be receiver and running back. We lost 2 receivers. We brought 3 in. So that's kind of like a push. But us bringing in 3 running backs, Beck is not as high on Matthew Fuller as I am. I kind of think that we would have been fine if we had to, or we will be fine if we have to depend on Matthew Fuller and Howell to be the 1-2 punch next year. But I am intrigued with the 3 backs that we brought in. If you get a guy from Texas, Penn State, and Ohio State, regardless of how much they've played, those are programs that recruit elite talent across the board, and especially at running back. The fact that we have hired Penn State's recruiting coach and one of them followed him makes sense. But just for those 3 portal backs, do you see any of them being a competitor for the starting job, or is that just more so us getting the scholarship numbers right because Blackwell didn't sign a high school kid for the past cycle?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, man. I look at this is nothing against the other kid, but I look at Christian Clark and Jabri Coleman kind of as the 2 where I'm going, they truly could I think they compete for that number 1 or number 2 spot. Now, I don't think that means, like, I don't think there's a Rocket Sanders in this class where we're all just moving him to the top of the depth chart. Everybody knew, hey, if Rocket's healthy, he's RB1, period, right? I don't know if that guy's there. And, I think early on they kind of made the decision, like, you have to allocate your resources. And early on, when you're in the kind of drawing board stage, you could have said, hey, we have to go get a number 1 running back. Or you say, no, we're going to have to put a lot of resources into O-line and D-line. And I think, it was the latter was the approach. And then I do think that Stan Drayton, from what we've heard, I don't have this firsthand, for what we've heard, he does like Matt Fuller. He does think he can be a starting running back in this league. There were some other schools that were trying to get Fuller into the portal. So just holding on to him was a pretty big win, I think, for Carolina. And so the thing that also stands out to me about Christian Clark is just the fact that they took him. Like, it was not a given that they were going to take a 3rd running back. And that was more along the lines of, okay, we like this guy enough to take a third running back in this class, in this portal
You're
class.
saying, the order in which we took him is significant.
Right.
You feel differently about it because he was the third back we took versus if he had been the first.
Right. Like, I think they would have been completely okay just taking the first two, and basically Christian Clark was good enough and interested enough that they said, wow, we should probably try to take this guy too. And, like I'm talking, because I mean, these guys know who's going in the portal. Like, all this stuff has kind of been like, the agents are talking, they're putting it out. Hey, my guy's going in the portal. My guy might be available. And so the fact that once Christian Clark went in, they jumped on him instantly, got the visit set up, and then got him committed. And, I also think, to your point, like, I think I have this right, man. Like, if you look back and kind of count backwards, it's like, all right, Jabri Coleman, he redshirted this year, so he has 4 years left. You haven't taken any high school backs recently, so Coleman is kind of very similar to taking a high school back in this class, but he just has redshirted, but he has 4 years. If you count back, I think Christian will be a redshirt sophomore, so that's kind of similar if you're stacking your classes to taking a high school back either a season or two ago. So you're kind of balancing out your room a little bit, and you've got some depth now. I mean, I think we all kind of saw flashes from Jawan Howell last year too, and the fact that it appears like he's sticking around, I think is somewhat significant in terms of depth and competition in that room. But I mean, if you go watch Jabri Coleman's high school film, like this kid was committed to Georgia at one point and decommits from them, goes to Penn State. I think, Thomas, to your point, that Stan Drayton has had an entire year of an evaluation with this kid in practice. So if anybody knows whether he can play and help, I think it should be Drayton, because you just got a behind the scenes look for an entire year at whether this guy can play or not.
Yeah, that's well put. And I feel like Beamer too, a body like Christian Clark and Jabri Coleman, I'm looking at it right now. They're 6 foot 212. Like, I feel like Beamer will use them on special teams. He just wants those types of bodies and athletes for the special teams units as well. Wes, going into the spring, what are some of the storylines y'all are tracking, or what do you think y'all will be focused on going into spring football? Obviously, the portal is ending now, and so it's a lot of talking season and speculation and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, guys, it'll be an off season of change, especially on offense, right? Like, I think we'll be focused on that, and I think there will be a little bit more portal movement just in terms of guys coming in, prior to that, and I think one thing I'll say real quick on the portal, I think fans got to remember too, like it's more and more like the NFL. It's not like where you could just stack talent like it used to be. Let me stack as many 4 and 5 stars as I can, and they're gonna just fight it out, and best man wins, and then you hope they stick around to play later in their careers. Those guys don't stick around anymore. Like, if they're not playing, they leave. So I think you're going to see, and we've already seen it a little bit, you're going to see South Carolina add some guys that are going to come in to fill some roles. And that may be you're recruiting a kid because you have 105 scholarships now. Like, I've already seen with some of these takes kind of down the stretch where people look, well, that guy hasn't really done anything at a smaller school. South Carolina, that probably means South Carolina's not recruiting that guy to come in and start. It just means you're backfilling some depth, some scout team stuff, maybe a special teams role like you talked about. Like, it's kind of like an NFL team sometimes adding to their practice squad. Like, you have to fill out some roles. So I've been trying to tell anybody that would listen, like, if South Carolina takes a guy and you're kind of going, why did they take him? It's not that they're saying come in and be the starting quarterback. It's that you're kind of trying to fill out those roles that maybe in the past would be filled out by a sophomore who's still just kind of waiting his turn to play, basically. But yeah, spring practice, no shortage of storylines. I mean, I think you have to start with Lenoris and kind of, I'll be very curious to see what are we hearing about this scheme. What are we, and this, to y'all's point earlier, will be where it will be very important for none of us to drink the Kool-Aid, because every new offense or defensive scheme for as long as I've ever been doing this has been awesome in the spring. And that's where, it's so easy. It's so easy to get caught up in it. I'm guilty.
You want to know the messed up thing about it? All of my intel was telling me that we looked awesome on offense this spring. All
Yes.
I heard was how dialed in Lenoris was this past spring. And unfortunately, I think that we all need to come to accept that the offense is always going to look better in practice than in a real game. And we don't know how good or bad. Like, if the offense can't score in practice, that might tell you something. But if they look good in practice, doesn't mean anything.
Well, and that's, dude, even go all the way up to preseason scrimmages. Like, I'm getting worried about the defense at that point, because I'm like, the offense is cooking the defense? Like, normally your defense will, especially, if you have some dudes on defense, the offense takes a little bit more time for everything to gel together, I feel like. So I'm going, wait, the offense looks clean and efficient in these scrimmages? I'm not used to that. And then, I mean, I went on a Gamecock club tour, and I was telling people how far ahead the offense is compared to usual, and I looked like a moron because but everybody was saying that. Like, it wasn't
first drive against Virginia Tech, though.
Oh my gosh. If they could bottle that.
Yeah, you're going.
I wouldn't have to sell cheesesteaks or beers anymore. I could just sell the first drive against Virginia Tech.
If you go back and you could bottle up the Twitter response in that moment, like, even from national people, oh, South Carolina looks for real. South Carolina looks legit. Hey, the opening script drive will get you. That you don't drink the Kool-Aid on the opening script drive, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think obviously, and we won't know anything about the O-line either. Even if we hear things, we won't really know. Here's what I think you can learn from spring and from, intel and from preseason stuff. And it's hard to do. I try to more be like, hey, we can learn things about individuals. Like what that guy does when he faces another SEC team, that's very hard to predict. But, the fact that this player has had a great offseason and is now going to start when we thought he'd be a backup, to me, that intel is pretty solid. Like, you can hear those things like that, and it can be very, very accurate. But football there's so many dynamics, so many variables to who's going to win a given play. Like, I think what we really get kind of caught up on is thinking in some way our preseason intel can tell us who's going to win a week 5 matchup, in the SEC. That's where I think we kind of get too far ahead of ourselves. But if Caleb Herring comes in and just looks like a dog opposite of Dylan and is doing everything he's asked, and hey, this guy's more twitchy than we thought, and all this stuff, I think there's some value. I think there's some accuracy to that. Hey, the O-line looks the best they've looked in years. That's where we got to stay away from the Kool-Aid until we see it.
This season hurt me. I mean, I probably haven't really genuinely had this much belief in August since 2014, unfortunately. And
oh, no.
we all remember how that season started. So I'm sticking to. I don't think that I will take a single sip until we are 3-0 and have averaged 35 points a game the first 3 weeks. If we can get to those thresholds, 3-0, 30-plus points per game, on the way to Alabama, I'll start sipping the Kool-Aid.
Thomas, you and I talked. Was that the day of the first game or a couple of days before the first game?
I think
this
it
year?
was the week. I think it was the week. I think it was week 0.
And
yeah.
You were so high on the Kool-Aid that
he drank the whole pitcher.
I won't even say some of the things you said. We'll just leave that in the vault.
Hey,
I believe it, but the thing about it is, I believe everything that I say when I say it. But I tend to always be let down or wrong.
Yeah,
but we believe it at the time.
We both said our first episode of this podcast was leading up to the Virginia Tech game. We both said, you go back, and I guess we don't have it on YouTube. We started putting on YouTube episode 3, so you'd have to go to Spotify or Apple, but you could see some crazy takes or hear some crazy takes. I mean, I said Michael Smith was going to be the breakout star of the offense. He was in the transfer portal by week 4. I mean, just some bad takes on that first episode.
Hey, we all had those though, man. Like, it wasn't just y'all. We all. I don't even want to. I cringe thinking about some stuff I probably said leading into this season. I mean, Here's the funny thing too. Y'all remember when some of the national guys didn't put South Carolina in the top 25 going into the season, and the fan base absolutely hammered these dudes on social media, like, you idiot, what are you, and it's like, well, maybe that guy had an inkling of we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah, hopefully. It feels like the hype around last season was centered around LaNorris, Dylan Stewart, Nick Harbor, and we have those guys coming back this year. So I'm like, can we take that nucleus and hopefully what we've done in the portal and with our, the shakeups on the coaching staff, like the team we thought we were going to get last year, we're going to get this year. And that's my hope. And I guess that's a little bit of Kool-Aid sipping, but Thomas is typically the more optimistic between the two of us, but I think going into this year, he's so beaten down. I think I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic going into 2026.
I mean, I can just see it on Thomas's face right now. Like that was tough. But Beck, I feel like you were starting to sip, like you're letting yourself sip just a little bit. So
I am. I am like Beamer. I was so mad after the Clemson game, and I was like, if Beamer doesn't do this, and this, like, I'm out. Like, and he did it all, though. Like, he did it all. I wanted him to flip Julian Walker and finish the high school class. I wanted him to crush the portal. I wanted him to get proven offensive coaches. Like, he's checked all the boxes for me. So I'm pouring the sugar in the water. I'm not drinking it yet, but I'm pouring the sugar in the water.
I thought number 1 on your hot board was Bobby Petrino.
I would have loved my motorcycle Bobby. I mean, talk about proven track record. He knows how to call offense. He just can't handle himself off the field.
Do you have anything else for Wes Beck?
No, I think that was
everything that I wanted answered.
Yeah, I think that was fantastic, Wes, and you stayed on a little bit longer than we had allotted for you. So really appreciate your time and chopping it up with us. Everyone out there listening or watching, check out Wes. He's on Gamecock Central. And again, I always remind folks, Thomas and I are just fans. The people like Wes are the guys that have the actual intel and information. So make sure to support their work and what they're doing covering the team. And then you can come listen to us for all the banter. But the key information is going to be coming from guys like Wes. So thanks for jumping on, Wes. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all, boys, and let's do it again sometime, okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it.
That was great.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you, Wes Mitchell, for jumping in and talking off-season South Carolina football. The portal is coming to an end, and so we're getting to a point where there's not going to be a lot of fresh news. So, as a lot of people like to call it, it's going to become talking season. Wes gave us some good insights into what they're going to be tracking for the spring, and so we'll be monitoring this stuff as well and talking about it as we hear things, and look forward to what's to come from the spring practices, and getting into summer ball, and then before you know it, we're back to real game time. So that was a lot of fun with Wes. Thomas, I don't think we really need to cover much more as it relates to football. Let's do a quick preview on the national championship, which is going to be tomorrow night. Miami versus Indiana. It seems like Indiana's a wagon, but also Miami has that Ohio State from last year feel. Just a team that Ohio State loses to Michigan, and you're like, what the hell? How the hell did this happen? They get in, and then they just start, dominating everyone. Miami hasn't quite dominated through their run like Ohio State did last year, but I feel like they were a team that people were trying to argue shouldn't be in the playoff, and they've looked physically better, especially on the line of scrimmage, than all of their opponents coming. A&M, Ohio State, Ole Miss. These are good programs, and Miami's kind of taking it to them on the line of scrimmage. So I'm interested to see that matchup. I mean, like I said, Indiana is just, they've been a wagon. And I saw some stat like Fernando Mendoza has 5 games where he threw more touchdowns than incompletions.
I think he has more touchdowns than incompletions in the playoffs right now.
And that could be true too. Like,
he has 8 touchdowns and 5 incompletions through rounds.
I mean, that's just insane. Like, they haven't been, and that's a credit to them. They haven't been, no one's been able to rattle them. But I think Miami's defensive line, if there's going to be one key to the game, if Miami's defensive line could get any type of pressure on Mendoza and rattle him, and maybe not even rattle him, but just make him uncomfortable. Because anytime a guy is throwing more touchdowns than incompletions, he's just in complete control of the offense, and is just playing, pitch and catch out there. So I do think Miami needs to dominate defensively, and then on offense, they have a great offensive line too, and trust that running game. Fletcher, get Tony involved in kind of the screen game, and Carson Beck has proved me wrong too in the playoffs so far. I was waiting for his interception against Ole Miss. Instead, he caps off the touchdown drive, and so he's got to be playing with a bunch of confidence as well. So I think it's going to be a great game. The line is 8.5. So it seems Vegas seems to think Indiana is the wagon, and I don't know. I'm gonna personally take Miami with the points, and we'll see what happens. But should be a great game tomorrow for the national championship. And it's in Miami. I don't think that really matters. It sounds like Indiana is bringing a whole lot of people to watch the game, so I don't think there's really going to be a home field advantage, even though the game's in Miami. But I do like the Hurricanes plus 8.5. I think they were plus 8.5 roughly against Ohio State, and I thought that was too many points versus Ohio State, just with how good they are on the offensive and defensive line. And despite what you think about Carson Beck, he's like a 7th-year senior, and he's 26 and balding. So he's a guy with a lot of experience. He's played a lot of football. So I think he's proven himself that this playoff run that he can be trusted in the big moments. And we'll see how he fares against Mendoza.
Yeah, I'm also gonna take the points, which sorry Miami fans, that's not a good sign when Beck and I are on the same side of a game. I do think 8.5 is too many. I think that Miami does present a bigger challenge on the lines of scrimmage than Indiana has seen thus far in the playoffs. And then, they have an experienced quarterback. They have playmakers on both sides of the ball. Malachi Tony's a baller. I was impressed with Miami's overall tackling, but especially tackling Lacey in space. I know that he got hurt, and so he wasn't his full self the entire game, but I thought that they did a great job of tackling him. He's one of the better backs in the country. So, yeah, I do think that, Indiana, the way that I would describe them is like a boa constrictor. They just suffocate you, and they do it by they don't mess up, and then you mess up, and they capitalize. Speaking of us being on the same side of the same game and it not going well, we were both on Oregon. I gave Indiana out on the podcast, but we took Oregon together, and we're sitting there watching the game. And the difference in the game before it got really out of hand was Oregon's turnovers and Indiana, punching it in for touchdowns. But not making a mistake and not beating yourself is like that means something.
That is a skill, yeah.
And Indiana has more or less perfected not beating themselves. They execute until you flinch, and then they take advantage of that. I'm giving out Miami plus 8.5. I do think I'm going to root for Indiana to win the game. I think it would be very meaningful as a South Carolina fan for a team that has never won a national championship to win one. I think it would be signaling a major changing of the guard in college football and just kind of like putting the blue bloods on notice. But, not only have they not won a national championship, prior to Cignetti getting there, they had lost more games than they were a historically bad football program. And, overnight they are at the top of the college football world. A win against Miami would give them the first 16-0 season in college football history. Sorry, Dabo. It won't be Clemson. But if Indiana can finish. So yeah, I'm excited to watch the game. Full disclosure, listeners, I'm taking a little hiatus from actually placing bets. So, y'all continue to practice responsible units, but just know that these picks that I'm giving out, I'm going to put as much time and energy into them as I have been, but I'm not going to be laying any money as a result of, just being cold for the past month and or my entire life. But yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought. But
yeah, it's going to be a good game. National championship.
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited to watch. I'm
Yeah.
I'm excited to take in the game, even though I won't have money on the national championship for the first time in quite some time. I'm excited to watch the game and see what happens.
Yeah, it's funny because you're like, from a fan's mindset, you're thinking, all right, Indiana should be the underdog, Indiana should be the David, but they're the big dog, they're the Goliath in this matchup, and so it's a funny dynamic with them going for their first national championship, historically bad program, so you feel like they're the underdog. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great game. Let's talk Court Cox chatter presented by Cajun Cousins. Whew, man. All the warm and fuzzies from the LSU game quickly evaporated with this team. We lost to Georgia, and we had Jake's takes on our last episode, big Arkansas guy, and we lost to Arkansas by a gajillion on this past Wednesday. Lost at Auburn yesterday. It's just not going to happen with this team. I don't see a situation where we don't. I don't see a situation where we have any success in the SEC the remainder of the year. I think we'll maybe snipe one or two opponents that get caught off guard, but I think this is going to be, the 15th or 16th best team in the SEC, and I bookmarked a statistic, or maybe I sent it to y'all. Hopefully, I have it in my bookmarks. And I don't. But the gist of it was 2 years ago we were walking off the court at the SEC tournament with our 26th win in school history, and that's a school record, tied a school record. And now here we are, and we've won, 5. We're like 5-30 in SEC play since then, and it's just bleak for men's basketball. I don't think Lamont's gonna make it to next year. I think he's gonna get fired at the end of this season, and we're gonna have to do a complete overhaul of the program. I know, to Thomas's point, he would prefer that we put more resources into football as opposed to trying to make our basketball team good. I don't know the truth to what we're doing in basketball. What I've read is that we did, up our resource allocation for men's basketball, but we're still a bottom tier program when it comes to men's basketball and what we're putting into it. So I don't know. I think we have to get a new face in there to lead the program, and maybe someone who can excite the fan base to want to buy in to this program. But right now it's bleak and not fun to watch, and it's rough. So
yeah, I mean, I had every game, or I had every TV in touchdowns on Bills Broncos yesterday, and then somebody asked me to change one of them to our game, shortly after it started, which I did do. And so I was able to kind of look up and track the score in between, making drinks, and it seems like we were competitive in the sense that, like, we just didn't let them walk away with it, and we fought to the end. But at the end of the day, Auburn's not a great SEC basketball team this year. I think we came in with identical records, 10-7, 1-3 in conference, and they were ahead pretty much wire to wire. So, yeah, I mean, as far as how to invest resources, I know that there are South Carolina fans that are South Carolina basketball fans in the same way that I am a South Carolina football fan, in that they care more about basketball than any other sport. And I feel for them, because as painful and frustrating as it can be to be a South Carolina football fan, feeling the way that I feel about South Carolina football, about South Carolina basketball, seems unbearable. And I'm not telling them how to invest their own personal NIL contributions, but I think that we would be better served as an athletic department. I mean, in a perfect world, we're good at everything, but I just don't know that that is a realistic expectation. I mean, this past year we weren't good at anything. So if I had to pick one thing to be good at, I pick football. And I do think that being good at football has the biggest return on investment. And maybe if we can find a way to be good at football first, there, that spills over into the other big three. But it's just an uphill battle right now. Everyone's kind of talking about how the SEC has lost its pole position in football, but in my opinion, we've been more dominant in baseball than we ever were in football, and basketball has become an incredibly deep, competitive, difficult conference as well. So just kind of looking at what we're working with versus what we have to overcome to be any better, I do just want to go all in on football.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, the basketball outlook is bleak, but we'll still support them, still talk about it. Baseball season's right around the corner. We'll be talking some baseball as well. Follow us over on Instagram and YouTube, as well as Twitter and TikTok. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We appreciate everyone who listens and or watches. We love doing this and appreciate everyone who listens and or watches. Again, can't say it enough. Thank you so much. This is going to be a wrap on this episode. Look forward to future talks around football, spring practice, basketball. We'll have some good. We'll think up some good content ideas for the spring and summer talking season where there's not as much news. Maybe we'll do a little bit more specifically tailored content in these episodes. So appreciate everyone who listens. As always, go Cox.
Go Cox.